It's kind of weird because I suddenly started to rationalize with the theory. And, well, it's not really exactly a theory, but and I was in meditation. I began to feel sad because I started thinking about power animals. Then I started going through the chronicles, different types of giant creatures, mammoth, just overall big creatures. And then I started to realize something. It clicked in my brain, and I went through this fucking giant synapses in my head, and I started putting pieces together. Very humane, not in a fast, crazy, trippy movie way. In a way of every 3 or 4 seconds, I had a new thought, and I started to piece things together that I could kind of review exactly, but it's not as amazing as explaining it to you, because it'll sound so common that it gets stigmatized out to a normal thing for us to be thinking, but it's actually kind of as crazy as describing how the fuck we can evolve arms and legs and common sense. But by the end of it, the environment since prehistoric times and humanity in our current modern day times has changed so much in psychological development that when I look back and I think about our effect on Earth and humankind in reality, in general perspective, I had the biggest epiphany. That one of those epiphanies that every once in a while people can't describe, that when they were stoned they had this giant moment. But I think this might make sense. It might be a really nerdy thought, and then you could just not enjoy it, or you might not, because it's just be what the fuck? That's not a big a deal. So what? Dinosaurs existed. But if I explained it to you in a very modern fucking way, it would probably blow your mind and be really shitty and depressing and intellectually insightful to the point where yeah, but nobody wanted dinosaurs anyways. But it would just be depressing to know that all the biggest, wildest wonders in the world were deleted because humankind chose a path. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not against us. I just thought it was sad and weird and startling, but also a good thing because they went to a better place. You know how they always say that they go to a better place or some shit like that? It's one of them things where oh no, they didn't die off, blah, blah. They went to a better place. Could you imagine a world where they're so full of non-violence and non-eating and full civilization, and animals aren't welcome there to behave a certain way, and all of a sudden the discovery of all the biggest, strongest animals that aren't necessary anymore to their ecosystem and died off maybe a natural way. There are still species of animals and different things that survive to this day unbeknownst to man, and we do not know why or how. They just stay alive. They probably should have just, let's say, went the way of the ecosystem of not having the right food, but still having some food, or not being perfect for their suit in the environment or whatever that kept them purposeful, or niche in society life and as a species or overall in the environment. Now, that being said, the startling, amazing part is that civilization drove out the most biggest gamut creatures in the universe. Not so because, of course, we were using dinosaurs as an example. But if you're thinking about the last frontier of wild animals that were Amazonian or behemoth type of size things, all of these extinct, almost extinct civilizations lost all of their biggest predators due to the simple organization of civilization, villages, growth, and normal prosperity. But when you review some of these big creatures and they had no actual correlation to their survival and what civilization took from them, you begin to believe the theory of aliens being from another planet and trying to elope with us, Trying, I say, because I don't exactly believe that, even though that's still somewhat partly true. But I don't want to believe it because it's kind of like, you mean we went along with that bullshit and we fucked some aliens, or they just did something to us? And, they did something to us. But it's common knowledge. Put it this way. It's like, if you're going to be a sports star athlete and you keep taking steroids, their philosophies are steroids. And we keep eating that shit, wanting more TVs and electronics and weird-ass technology, or gyroscopic, inverted spherical, fucking platinum orbital propelled helicopter planes, but they wouldn't be helicopters. So anyway, from the double helix theory of where we all came from. Now, I don't know, but our request to want more of this type of things as we grow and evolve and do things leads us to, we probably borrowed some divine wisdom from them by accident or on purpose, and this is what it's like when worlds collide, whatever. Anyway, but that it's a part of the fact that when actuality meets theory and there is nothing but total conspiration or whatever. Total, what was the word I'm looking for? It's right next to that word I fumbled. I'll get it back later. But anyways, that happens, and it's almost like automatically or auto-dialected into, this is what reality is now. We are not green and blue people. Now, of course, green and blue things have a partial invisibility to the world, as well as silver and gold. So by the end of it, you know that because of how things are raised and how things are divided in life, things are not allowed a certain level of evolution in life, unbeknownst to what the aforementioned of the translation of life is, or our perception of life. So other things in life and reality are not visible by dimension and such. So on and so forth. But this going into play in the understanding of what happened to the percent of the world. Because I started to look around in my mind for a moment, and I realized if the universe is that big and our story is this big, every other thing in physics and in the universe is a certain size in proportion, or quantized, or fraction, or cosmonized into an understanding that all of these things are equal into a variable for what life's whole is kind of worth, or fractaled into. So now I want to teleport with a mandelbot. But anyways, the real thing and the real point I'm getting at is that when I added up all these things psychologically, and like any other mystic or guide or quester or something or spiritual being, I started to add it up, and I'm like, okay, they're on the ark, the other one's on the ark, got 2 goats, got 2 pigs. I definitely noticed those. I got 2 sheep, or lambs. I definitely noticed those 3, and whatnot, and the other 2. Yeah, I'm gonna put the wolf and the fox over there. I got you. All right, and now back to the fucking point. So you go through there, and after you're done with your checklist, and then you go back and you're like, yeah, but I did check the animals. And then I checked again, and I started to realize something. If we're becoming, or as we were becoming, more solidified in humanity, and I started looking back at the old wives' tales and the old gentlemen's stories, or the legendary stories and shit, and I look back and I'm like, human beings were said to be averagely 7 to 8 feet, even at certain beginning parts of American history. Before American history, it was like, a lot of other things said too that were wild ass shit, but it was like, okay, we had no history, we pretend we have no history, because it would be stuff that's like that scares us like animal or caveman shit after all the dissing we did to call each other animals or whatever. It seems ludicrous to go back and talk about history where we behaved more like savages or more like what we don't criticize as much anymore as modern day technology has learned to vastly live. Hopefully I'm not too obscure or omniscient to the conversation or to the point I was making, but let's get back to the more frontal point of what I was really getting at. I thought that was a perplexing epiphany. But to furthermore explain, if you go back and you look, and maybe I'll make a little mini documentary if I get some more time to be nerdy. If I get more time, but I doubt it. I have so many weird speeches that just get thrown away in a locker. But anyways, I started to realize that if you start adding all this up as the world changed, even from my old grandfather's great-grandfather's story, or no, my grandfather's grandfather's story or something, or father's story, is still a lot of neat things to attribute up. But then when you hear stories of like Babe and the Blue Ox, and just to put it into perspective, because all the other stories I got, they were clearly not like exactly real, but it was kind of like, so we were doing the bar and the spittoons were getting full and the carpet was too heavy to lift without a donkey. And out of nowhere, this 7 foot, 8 foot guy, I think they described this guy as like 10 foot, but back then they would be saying something about like, whatever, and, like how tall they were, but like they exaggerated because he was just really big. So it's probably more like 7 foot. But like these guys were seen as like, shaman or lead generals and warriors for other cultures and shit. But it was old enough that I shouldn't describe it to put a perspective to it, but just think a little bit before cowboys and Indians type of shit, or exactly for me, cowboys and Indians. But it's still like very huge people, but that's the tail end into where it can correlate for modern day perspective, or for something that wouldn't be so old that you don't see the correlation in it, except for like what was some kind of a weird stories. But anyways, let's get back to the point. Out of nowhere, from behind the housing or the town shop area, this 8 foot tall dude comes out of nowhere like a fucking cartoon and lifts the giant beam of carpet and drags it inside of the fucking saloon and puts it in there. Now, keep in mind, it wasn't really like common to have that much carpet or whatever, but it was just one of those things where they had a giant cloth and they could not lift it. So anyway, but yes, common and not common. So anyway, so stuff like that would be the stories that I'm talking about that I know of that are, given to me and other people that I would know. But some of the other stories that we know about, like Babe and Blue Ox, some of the other things that were just rumored but could be kind of true and make sense with a lot of these things. But I've heard enough of it to know that this is not just as much as a rumor as that this was commonplace knowledge for them back then. Then there's also the gamut of what Jesus' real height was, what life was really like for them, how most of them were kind of shorter anyways, the way growth was and different things like that. And then another epiphany bumped off into my fucking head, and I started to realize the human health standard since the medieval times and since cowboy times and since all these universal plane shifts or continental plane shifts occurred, and the growth of technology, the effect of technology on the environment and hunting and foraging, and what it did to the growth of animals and human beings, how it stinted the growth of some populations and also caused famine in different other countries that were war-torn and couldn't afford to bring back weapons, but ended up burying weapons until it ruined the soil and weren't able to grow their food back without it being somewhat different. So a lot of things have happened and occurred in the world that I started to have an even bigger epiphany, where when I add this all up, the world was literally living, dying, and breathing laps in between human progress and pioneering between each other in history that no one even noticed. That the secret bump in the night, the little monster out in the fucking woods that isn't even the wolf sometimes, the chupacabra that seems so small, all of these giant crazy creatures disappeared. Not like just dinosaurs, but also the human population growth has spiraled into growing. I fucked up that word. What was it? Unbridledly grow, even though, for the lack of a better word, into populations where they're well nourished and all the things are different. We discovered diseases, different chemical effects on the environment, how to farm and dispose different chemicals and waste in a new environmental way that was sound to the environment, how to dispose trash appropriately so that there wasn't so much debris or runoff and gas exposure and all these things, or mining incidents. All of these things start adding up, and you realize the invisible hand of God, occasionally, as we call or as we know God, is invisibly viewable from time to time rationally throughout the sorcery in life, which by I mean the old classic word for why sorcery is seen as kook word, because it's like basically the derivation of like, you like using the internet, they like using books. It was annoying for both of them because these should all be things that we know, experience, and grow from in life, and not just sit there and read books and become nerdy and not know how to live life, because we know everything about life except for how to actually live and use life and utilize it like a tool, instead of knowing everything about it and then mistreating life on the occasion of being so arrogant as to be ignorant. Things like that. So we get back to the overall perspective, and when I look at it and I go down my list of psychological things or psychoses and different psychological pronapses, I get back to, holy shit, the retroactive epiphany was that within humanity being in its own proof of its great glory and divinity and intelligence or intellect or whatever, all of these inheritances all lead us to have a life that is derived from fate and build and mold around situation, cause, effect, supply and demand, and so many other things. The washover effect of all those things have left humanity with scars, wounds, scales, grains, and taints, and more than just the natural growth that we wanted. But all of that self-evident, and the growth worth more than anything that we have succumbed to. Great in all those things. But then I started to realize, what were the animals doing? Why did we lose a certain amount of creatures over a certain size? Why did they not lose their niche? They didn't lose their environmental predatorial things that they were eating on. I forget what they were called. I hate the word anyway, so I'll probably delete it. So anyways, and because sometimes I just delete some of my vocabulary. It's like, why the fuck would animals need a victim and shit or whatever? Oh, prey, that's right. Anyways, and like even when I was thinking more vegan, I was like, I don't need the word prey. But anyways, other than prey. But anyway, but they have their own reasons. So anyway, by the end of it, I started to realize, if they had no effect on humankind, then I got a quote. Do you think it grew 2 legs and walked off by itself? Bro, mind blown. Now, let me tell you something. Even when we weren't paying attention, even when there's leftover evidence of nothing that should have resolved in them going extinct, and then the other proofs of life that seem so dwindling in comparison to what is visually seen and unseen about what we know about life. Like, when you barter with somebody and they're making a deal and no one knows who fate belongs to, and everyone has a number over their head, but you can't determine the value of why people seem that it's so necessary to be greedy for survival. And even when there is no one adequate to determine our leadership and our worth and our understandings philosophically, we all realize that we are in the hand of the penance, the borrower, the penance, the wager, and the barter, and what we represent to the ideals of slavery and ownership. And as we are cast forth into a world where we know nothing but our true honor and worth is supposed to dignate what we are, we still can't get back how hard we work, and it seems worthless to know that the price on our head is never going to be quite right for everything that we have to do to contribute what we know is right and fair to honor. So by the end of it, there are people always, as we are walking through life, dealing, dueling, fucking poaching, and putting a price on our head as we walk through life. Your angel and your devil dancing in a circle around your head, your life, and everything you love and own, even in the prosperity of owning you, and the solidarity of what true belief is, in the weakness and the strength and the fertility in humanity. They have to gamble with other demons and the angels for your sanity, well-being, and your worth and wealth to the overall consumerism, or whatever it be at that main time, what they consider the applicable facade of what you're worth or such. Now, I beg to say I put it this way, I prefer to not say the worst word. So anyway, because I just don't want that to be a stain in your mind, or mine either, when I look back on it. Now, we get back to a furthermore point. With all that gambling going on with humanity and no one knowing what they're fighting for, even with war and basic philosophies that we fearlessly have to defend for any to no reason, because it could be just as easily printed out and we would have had to work and follow it for what our wage was and never really know. So we had to learn to fight for ourselves. That includes the greater, worse philosophies of war is good for nothing, but everything then worth less than more than the last stupid thing that we thought that we remembered. So we fight harder than what we remember to fight for something correct. So not war is correct to remember to fight for. Seems ludicrous. So anyways, now that that's caught up into the falsity, let's get back to the real point. While all this was going on and no one knows what's really going on, as boring as animal life could probably be or get, I don't think many of them belong to any demons, and I don't hash out that many fucking deals. So it's like, yeah, I can see the obvious part, and you will too later, but it's still at some point. Because it's just like, oh, okay, demon, duh, you know. But anyway, when it comes back to all the necessity that goes into what life could actually be worth, they're not even interfering all that much. But to say that the desert may or may not have wiggled off of an axis between 30 or 60 degrees acutely from what life was doing while starving and deprivating itself throughout society, going back and forth. To say that we may or may not have ever had an answer there, and why no one would ever remember the difference. So logistically, we still get to the fact of what was going on throughout the world, and how could we line up so many different temples in order to help us keep time and perception within their microcosm of their hierarchies. No one would have ever noticed the difference other than perfection, or the lack thereof better of the lack thereof worse. So, for better or for worse, the animals disappearing, and simply the quote, what do you think? It just grew legs and walked off? Amazing. Amazing. And then that's what human beings were doing. So then we go back and we look at it and we see the civilization and why are you afraid of Gentiles and shit. And like, I still was thinking about it and I started laughing because it's still one of the things where like, okay, there are some reasons to be afraid of Gentiles, but even when I secretly know, I still every once in a while ask and see what they actually know about Gentiles, because degeneration is a very difficult word to not understand how disgusting it is, but to still watch and know how many people just hate it and don't really understand why most of them have the teen angst to be against it, and they just want more revolution and generation and growth, but really know it's almost against the grain if the world's going to be a disgusting person. So back to the point. Now, with that being said, how could all over the world, with all the great acts and craziness that are going on in the world and environmental changes, are we as human beings and animals and all the other things in the nature of reality in the ecosystem, which is very fragile, have an effect so great on everything else that all of our biggest creatures disappear? All of our best, our biggest rainforests and wild forests and jungles and tundras and all these things slowly kind of disappear and reappear in time and space through, seasons, environment, global weather change, event change and environment, and all these other different things, which could be even as simple as most proven things. Small animals going extinct from an ecosystem causes a lot of bigger problems in the long run that, it just does. Because when they eventually leave, you're like, holy shit, a mini dinosaur? That fucking lizard is dead or moved and shit. Like, that little lizard? Of course not. But, I'd believe some things, though, at first glance. So anyway, I went back to the exact thing that I'm like, if this is the case, that all of these things can be affected by such small ecosystem, this might be a believable thought. So I go through all of it and I started to realize they're not, there's tall people in the world, but these things aren't random giants anymore. It's not like a random thing. We're suffering from less disease. People are living longer. Also in recompense to that, they're getting taller, bigger, more fruitful, less disease, bigger memories and lifespans, bigger memories, a lot of health. Life cycles are driven to a certain extent where we're actually receiving a lot of benefits and growth in life. It's not like we're dying at 30 and barely remember anything outside of a newspaper, which would have been considered philosophically prominent, a simple newspaper place. So, and we've been doing that for thousands of years, so how the hell is that still like technology and shit? Whatever, even books considered technology. All of these great things and animals slowly but surely out of that whole place silently grew legs and walked the fuck out of there or just disappeared. That's amazing because, let's put it even more into perspective. So we lost anacondas. We lost a few species of types of gorillas. We lost, if you go back and you look at all the extinct lists of animals and different species and shit, you start to begin to get an extra story where you're like, holy shit, some of these species just walked the fuck off. They just fucking gave up and died. And it was like, oh my God, you must hate Gentiles. So, some of that's true. Some of that is just fed up with it. Some of it just left. And you can see the invisible hand of God just being like, this animal shit, not that he was always an animal type of person, this animal shit just isn't working out. These humans are doing all this crazy shit, and more as they have an effect that's positive on the environment, but also very, very negative. I'd say 25 positive, 75 negative. It still becomes that, not even just with hunting them out or searching new land or anything like that, because, they move away or find a new place to live or they have a way of holding on to life or fighting back. All of those things can be true. But then when it gets down to a very external, mighty point, how could all of that just go that one way, considering how much damage and environmental effect that things were having on human beings while we were unwiser or barely paying attention. And all these great stories about giant beast creatures, Loch Ness monsters, all these things that even if you take those with a grain of salt and you go back and you compare them to other creatures that disappeared, what the fuck happened? Why would animals just like disappear? Just grow two legs and walk away? Like, what the fuck? It's just like a crazy story. But I really want to put emphasis on that. I should write down some more extra facts, because I'm hesitant to say some other things because some of it is frankly too shocking for you to have to take me serious about something that you should really go and check out. So basically the population of extinct animals and shit like that, and or overpopulated animals, and their effect, or the effect on the environment that caused them to go out of existence, or why they mysteriously disappeared. Because it was always weird. You don't just like run out of existence, other than the environment changing a lot and our effect on it. But even if you think in some of those cases they were driven out of life, usually they have a way of surviving. There's always some kind of species left over. But to rationalize that the world has changed that much, and it's not even just the result of Gentiles or civilized behavior. It's because you know how animal philosophies are. Because if you ever meet true animal people, they always like every once in a while throw out a wild philosophy in there and try to force you to have a moment with them and believing it. Because it's just not a problem with it. Because you're supposed to be able to eat and survive, and they want you to think a little bit for yourself and have a backbone, or whatever fuck. Which is another great quote. But anywho, so let me see, where was my greater point in all this? But by the end of it, even when they blame disease and all these other different things, and a lot of people who know what disease actually is know better, from a spiritual sense, that is. Because, like, if you know it scientifically or you know it some other way, you are the tamer, that's okay, you cleaned it up, blah, blah, you punched it in the face, whatever, and you did it in a way that is undisputed science. Oh, well, no big deal. We have to learn to accept certain things, and that is just disgusting or whatever. So, you know, not every disease is coming from like, you know, the bearers of all logic or whatever the fuck. But by the end of it, it's just one of those things. Now, we get to the other part, and it's like, if they all grew two legs and just walked the fuck off, the real secret is that our parents stopped hunting them. They stopped going all the way out into the woods and finding them and bragging about them, talking about them, inciting a different humanity in real life, maybe depressing the animals from like, wow, civilization is really that nice, and we have to go back and like keep farming and hunting what we don't know is evil about ourselves being animals, or any of the other extra things. And I start to realize, like, or survival at all, which is a very well-respected philosophy, and even more so to the guy that goes jogging or whatever and finds everything spiritual. But it's just one of them things where, okay, if that all fits into one angle, why is it that you get the idea that what's left over is that they all left this world for better reasons than what we are worth as human beings? Not even just because they could possibly hate us. We're not talking about just, you know, fucking animals here. But also animals and aliens. Most other life forms left us for some annoying reason, like it could have even been as arrogant as the mistake that we made to become so great or whatever. Which is just as well and just as good as for survival, and wish them good and better, because we wish them good and better for ourselves, and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to the class and the guile to act responsible and all that, they went back to living their lives patiently and working on things. So then when I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, the universe in a whole probably knows this and understands this. And the only things that are left over that we don't understand, don't even seem to care about, or don't even have the power, the capacity to relinquish what the real reality looks like in life. Although not just scary, but so different, that what isn't actually advanced about all of it is that we choose to ignore a portion of it. Now, even when they say stuff like, oh, you use 10% of your fucking brain, what if we were like ignoring 90% of actual reality and are living to ourselves in what is probably a result on being betrayed? Because it's like, what if there was only originally, 10 families, 12 families, 16 families, or there were originally only like what they know to have 2 families, which they say is impossible, or why would have been, maybe 3 or 4 families. And we all know these kind of stories, but we're so used to them that we forgot that we're pronouncing life, and that these are all stories that have an explanation to what we knew as the original families and the original houses, or it was so normal to us that we forgot to see that there is some futility in these stories, for the fact that, of course, if they were or weren't not true, isn't why we described them. We described them to get an angle on, if you know that it's possible for them to have 2 families in the beginning, what the fuck happened, and how the hell did they get through all that without being deformed, growing illegitimately, not seeming human, missing certain things within what a human chemistry would be, or what would I call that? I guess I would say chemistry, because it would still boil down to like, how are they processing chemicals? Do they eat this kind of way? How is that going to generate a human being that can barely sustain a dimension? So anyway, or the things you would need to have to not futilize a dimension, or maybe their perception isn't anything like ours, and also what we think isn't a dimension isn't painted like a zodiac star affair or anything, or some kind of L. Ron Hubbard, like, God creature or something. It's just not painted that way, because the creature might be a planet itself. So it just hasn't grown its futility, or we haven't grown the intellectual infancy itself to understand. So by the end of that, the creature is inverted in on what itself is, and you're reading its skin too much more than its actual soul, or you have it backwards and perceive that to be reality, and that it has no interpretation of its real thoughts or feelings. So anyways, back to the chronological real fucking point about what I'm saying about the animals and everything else. They're psychological, got up, grew 2 legs and arms, and walked the fuck away. Or the other theory is that if they didn't do that, somehow they mated with us. Well, let's say asexually. Mated with us interceptively and endowed us with perfect wisdom and knowledge. Now, the reformation of deformation and generation to degeneration to degenerate would only allow you to understand that the comprehension of that is so critical that the assimilation of it was never behounced to us. So we never formally understood that to pronounce us. So that's it. That's too crazy. So by the end of it, yes and no, and that's against the laws of life and reality. But so many of the things that belong to what isn't exactly metaphysics still wouldn't be a unisomal understanding for how we philosophically grasp the world, or interpret the world, or see the world. So none of those things can coexist with each other in a uniform explanation that would be so definitive as vision, eyesight, perception, integrity. I want to call it integrity because that probably should come before perception, because all integrity would be based upon something. So it's not like they would only be evil or as low as class as animal, or for survival or predatorialism. So perceptional torialism. So I don't know. Either way, it sounds as disgusting as the discovery of wisdom or intelligence in your own mistake or in your own evolution. It's just as scary as anything else. So the inverted complex to that would probably be the notable understanding, the dudity, the dudity, to understand or do writing. But anyways, to understand, like, the concept of that is ininterpretable to us, simply because the logic isn't as twisted as something we wouldn't understand than to understand the futility of discovering something yourself that isn't already forementioned, that isn't already for existence, that isn't already pre-understood, pre-founded. That's so crazy. So you can't make a mistake because evolution would have been evolution, not like something just walking or crawling and falling and making mistakes. So it just grew two legs and walked away, knowing it, fucking knowing it. Go look. It's weird too to like go back there and see how crazy we are, and then realize that this thing is just surviving and may have learned enough to know that you're already doing such a good job that it could just automatically assimilate you, continue doing what it wanted to kind of finish off a good duty, leave you with your own civilized dignitation, and unbeknownst go live in a better premonitial life and be better off than what we noticed for what was endowed as a better audacity. That's too crazy. So it may not have even fucked us. Oh, that's great. Hypnox is happy about that part. It may have not like taken us, against our will impressionably. That's good, because that's all I cared about, them throwing that part away. So anyway, so the assimilation of the disambiguation of and the notation, right, the Nosterian fury. But like by the end of it, what it really is that if that's the case, we can't remember going back, because now you want to remember the scar of fucking them, because you don't want to remember where civilization lapped each other began and end, and their little fucking insensitive, arrogant debates between each other for who proclamated or profited off of what they had to do to procure this bullshit. To procure this bullshit, to prosperably procure this bullshit. So I don't know. Like, it just fucking sucks. It's just terrible. And then I get back to the other point, and I'm just kind of like, so all of this giant mass and energy that dies, and when creature dies, that's ultimately, as you know, a shame in the world that it's just kind of deleted, or is the same repeating thing that's always repeating, and you know how to ride this bus. And then it gets back to the fucking point that it's unfucking believable that all of that mass, energy, love, that life and energy doesn't, ever stop. It just kind of changes and keeps going. So that's energy. So by the end of it, all of that shit dies off, the ecosystem, all these different things, all these things you're used to that may be just dead, and it somewhat is true. But like little spaceships, only the captain that goes down with the ship knows or remembers the last log. And even when you don't write it down because everybody knew better, it's still just as much the loss as knowing better and still having to give the last order for what was correct anyway. So even in the end, the story of recognition that they know or has no meaning to any of them and any of us, besides the fact that I just want to know that we were not violated, we were not supposedly violated, unless people considered some of those things violation, but to an higher intellect that knew that it was probably wanting something so feeble as what you see the new elemental creature doing when they first arrive is like, what is this food? What are these definitions? What do these humans mean? And it's like all really kind of innocent, and then they go to go do their mission and then disappear into like a normal kind of professional life, that's just the story. They probably didn't violate you. Probably wasn't a violation story. But we're talking about you don't remember them leaving you civilizations with little crazy hints on their way out and way in. Of course, we all call them on my side demonics because, we don't remember you trying to work us over into some kind of thought or theory or something we couldn't debate with because you flew off with the spaceship, or that you did some things with psychological things that you went your own way about, and we just left it that way because we thought it was better that someone traveled at all than what we were doing to argue at the time, or what we knew was already the greater debate that history would be chronicalized appropriately anyways, because we were living and they had a way to go to remember for themselves. So their map home was their map home, and we continued the other right way for ourselves. But that also goes into the fact, can you really explain what these extra things in our bloodline is, or why you don't find it suspicious at all that even with older religions, because I have a different religion that I'm born from than what's normal, but I don't talk about it much because it's kind of seen by all other religions as kind of blasphemy. But maybe I'll talk about it one day because I don't really believe it in myself, and I see it as blasphemy too. But anyways, I'll explain that later because it's not really anything wrong with the culture or place, I guess, but it's just one of those old religions that is born from war and blood and shit, and I don't like talking about it because you'll start to realize that even when it's not the other religion you're thinking of, because that one is closer to the Spanish or the Latin bloodline. So even if it is somewhat demonic at times, it still isn't as bad as it's still more well known and is worse than the other religion that I have. But it's just one of those religions where if I explain everything to you, you'll start to realize that oh, that's why you guys don't have different profiting systems for what relevant progress is. So anyways, we'll close the door on this and we're going back to minding our own business, but it wasn't supposed to be that bad that you would have to worry about it, or the other religion. But the other religion was still known for that because they profited off of the sake of blood, and ours was off of the sake of suffering. So it's kind of just as bad, but in the poor insight that they can accept that because they are all known to do business these days amongst the devils. So it's just a commonly accepted fact that we all work for the devil or have sold out to the devil. Now, anyways, that's just something. Now, it's not like everything I judge us about, and I still, believe more in religion. So anyway, despite what they would consider a bunch of weird mistakes. So back to my point about that going into it, the double helix is supposed to feature all these different chromosomes and different other things from animals. But what if that's the standard for the human deal? For the human deal, that all of us have to agree that all of these things took place in time and space. So as you were walking, going to do something, and you got tired, and then suddenly you got a burst of energy, it's because a frog slipped in there, gave you 2 fucking cells, and then fucking left, and then you were good with your salad that day instead of feeling bitter and weak. Because the frog translated for your salad from 2 weeks ago. How long has this fucking frog been sitting there? Has the frog been watching me for 2 fucking weeks? What? Why? Anyway, back to the fucking point. So that's some Hippocratic bullshit. Now, back to the overall oath. If this is true, so all of these deals with the devil I have to obey and remain in my omen and not hexing them back. So in the fourth of my habit to give my fight back, I can't front them henceforth to fight back hence? Nah, I don't believe that shit. So the present tense and the present day future is to look like we don't delegate any democracy because it's a Republican to belief. Fuck that. It's not a 2-party system here. So either way, that'd be you and him arguing, and I'm still sitting here like, every animal has always forsaken to take care of me with the better integrity of what they had at the time when they were classical. Now, of course, I'm not being a smartass, but holding that position for a temporary amount of time while they dignify the fact that no one is asking us to debate or duel our lives to the higher meaning or the purpose of why they would try to define it in a lower meaning to pass a substandard. Okay, whatever. Anyways, now, of course, all of that stuff matters because, of course, a salad should not make you feel weak because you have never kept anything in life. So it's not like, okay, the frog helped you out because it was supposed to. Prince. But then by the end of it, what does that have to really do with anything? Oh, the lizard and the cat there because they want you to be warm every once in a while or some shit. Fur, and the other one gets cold and sleepy. And then you like snuggling. Anyway, so you're a vicious predator-phile. But anyways, so back to the proclatorial filer. So the real embed issue is that if all of those things are on the double helix, and there is no other secret double helix, so the sphere doesn't work that way. So all throughout the universe, besides the great apocalypse that made everything visible because people think that they can see their real emotions in 3D when they're at war for more than a whore. Sell yourself out. It's a tragedy that you fight back. Anyway, take this necklace and get out of my office. But what it does have something to do with is that all of these things come to a certain level of how do we not see this for what it really is. Now, even if I'm too busy fighting demons and the devil and how everybody wants to bet on your life and make you a monster attraction and, it really is a mechanical animal, a dope show, and don't you want to get high and what it's like to be a superstar. You don't get none of this shit. My God. You gonna fuck me in a limousine? Come on. Anyway, so we went back to the point of the reality of it is that even if we're not fighting the ox, the demon, or any of these other things, and we're not fighting sheep, we're not fighting fucking pig, ham, swine, boar. We're not fighting any of those motherfuckers in this fictitious slang names and all that shit, or insidious slang names. We're not fighting the fucking lamb. We're not fighting the fucking goat, or not anymore. We're not fighting all that other motherfucking shit, and we're still caught up in this factor of who the fuck is hashing out all these deals, and even if it had a greater purpose, where the fuck did you come from and what is your fucking meaning? So you get back to the elaboracy of I don't see the missing link in all this and how all of a sudden you came up like a hustler. You came up like a hustler. You ever see that certain psychologicals of people are missing in you as a mystic or a shaman or whatever, a healer? You think that your brother is as righteous as you are in their commitments to eat souls of lives of dead cannibal corpses of people whose mindsets don't feel like mind being, like a zombie. So what was I supposed to do? And then there is no psychological. They're inconsistent as my prayer and void. And then to realize that I can't call them soulless because they're my brother, or I felt good about them. And then all of it means nothing except for, do you mean? And then so where did it all go? So all of it in the vacuum of some persistent logic that we can never afford for each other. And all that because Marlon Brando was an animal person. So you do the justice and honor that you can, and I'm sorry, Miss Jackson, they just have so many fucking psychological problems. Fuck the roof with the fucking rain hole in it. These people got fucking problems, G, and they have no psychological grasp of what they're fucking doing with them. And I'm just you gonna let that dude bet on your life while you're running 20 yards down that field? Hell yeah, we're going to cheer on his death and throw some popcorn there. Anybody got any more of them fucking corn dogs and shit? I'm tired of these fucking hot dogs. Like a corn dog, maybe a little bit different, What? They deep fry turkeys now? So anyway, we went back to the overall point there has to be a catch to this. It can't just be suffering for them, or the fraction that is actually suffering honoring things, or the fact that we probably wouldn't have an existence without them anyways, according to my other religion of fucking suffering. Because there is things where, like, we'll put it this way, it's an old enough religion that the modern day memory that you have of my older religion of suffering, I want to call it, is that chicken bones used to be a part of voodoo wishes because animal parts used to actually help save our lives. Why does the double helix look like that in modern day world? So you know, even when you sit there and you put together suffering and everything on the other side, like alcohol and what dimension that is, that you just randomly start crying when you were happy, get used to it. That's called being awoke. Now, even when, and I don't want it either, well, let's go back to normal then. But by the end of it, you should have a grasp of the understanding, because it's not cancer anymore threatening your life. It's not all these weird shade forms of what's mediocrely wrong with life, or what's the word I'm looking for? The word that they were using recently. The effect of people trying to profit off of life and leave you forsaken and, you know, live a better profit margin than you. It's not just these things, even though it has a lot to do with that. But that's almost natural for them to do, to be greedy or so on and so forth. Now, I wish it just wasn't in spite of creation or the things that are left for all of us to progress about. But that's all, because success shouldn't mean as much. But anyways, to nurture what life is, success shouldn't mean that much. And it probably has nothing to do with nurturing life anyway. It just probably is an incentive that got blown out of proportion as if nothing else. But, you know, whatever. Anyways, we'll try not to be spoiled. So, back to the other fucking point. If we can understand all this and somewhat of the definitions being readily invisible, and knowing that every other philosophy or philosophical word doesn't facilitate the understanding of the tangibility that it takes to coherently understand the illusion that you are actually living in. You will never get to view those dimensions in hard fact without the perception of the higher division of pioneering or imprisoning people. So the priority first was to punish and never forget the regret last. To regret the last one who probably made a mistake. So life went into a different conundrum and got stuck. So anyways, back to the fucking point. Since they are better off gambling off the parts of their life that aren't as valuable as true belief, wisdom, and foundation in life, the double helix will never be prepared by two angels that kicked this fucking demon's ass and got rid of it because the other one shape-shifted into angel and gave up on it. Now, I don't know why. And I don't know, by the way, the other religion has nothing to do with demons, just for the record. We have, on that other natural or very far away tribal side of religion, we have nothing to do really with demons. We just know the name and procured the name from what we knew about in the other culture. So it's actually a lot more peaceful, but the shadow of, let's say the shadow of Hesitians, so that you can go to another country and not like overthink this bullshit. Because there's a lot of like weird tribal warfare in the other country that I'm from. That this is very old, by the way, too, because it's not in my direct bloodline. So I don't need you to like think that like there's still modern day warfare of that equivalent. Because if I really went through some of the stories, you'd be like, holy shit, that's where all that comes from. Like, you ever like heard from some cultures the true words of all these things? Like, if you go and get like a 6th degree education in an international college or something, you'll figure out what all this is, because they actually talk about religion like it's a common thing for them. So you learn a lot more about the world and other people's perceptions on what they were actually dealing with, fighting with, and the alternative definition to the dual edge of the sword. Like tyranny or totalitarianism in our normal modern day country is such a disgusting, mean word that it literally gets translated as a husband and wife arguing for moral superiority and sexuality, or superiority and moral sexuality. What the fuck? And that's how they translate on purpose, for it to be a little bit nicer and a little bit more understood than we don't pay them that money because we don't owe them for some work that would have been blood and slavery for what would have been a standard for us to do on our own. So we run the government ourselves through what we negotiate is a better transaction for what our emotions provide us to do, or something like that. So even getting lost within just that basic explanation without trying to offend anyone for how lunatic even the other side seems, it still would be the other paradox to all that, is that when the other 2 or 4 cultures explain it, it's literally a derivement of, well, the other one tried to tell the kingdom to suck his toes or something, and they lost the argument, so they did, but we hate it, and then we went back to almost killing ourselves for this king. And then there's another culture where they all refused, thought it was weird, and went to go work harder, but what they did pay themselves back is that the government was so harsh that what they knew about the religious word was a disease, so the disease was accidentally created from what wasn't growing around because they let things grow on them because they thought it was a part of the kingdom. So fungus is a tree. Now, I don't know where I get all this shit from other than just normal stuff, but I'm not big on the reading thing, okay? So I do read, and I do read important stuff, but when it comes to like inheritance, endowment, empathy, and a bunch of things that I do reject in life so I can be a better tarot card reader and a palmstress, y'all out your fucking mind sometimes. Anyway, back to the fucking point. Like, why would I want that? It's like almost an instruction manual on like who to taint for like not doing the job right, and why we don't do it anymore. So because they didn't involve love and compassion for a small village that you believed in was working hard every day. So they had more important things to do about it anyway. Right? So anyway, back to the fucking point. So the normal, relinquishable understanding and interpretation of all this leads us back into how scary is that no one is fighting the devil or the fucking demon with all this parasitical paradise life for what it's worth, to be goat man for the empire, to be high man for the empire. Don't you hate it when your parents do shit like that to you? It was like fucking bludgeon you with the stupidest fucking, like, just accept it. We are going to be rich. And we're all going to get along dancing around like it's bliss. God damn it. No. Back to the fucking point. But then if you had to fuck a frog in its ass, you wouldn't have to kiss a prince to tell him not to suck your toes when you're trying to fuck your wife in the bath. Bruh. Stay focused. Now, back to the fucking point. Back to the fucking point. And to fucking, like, warrant the brothers to come and kick your ass. Now, back to the fucking point. Like, it still boils down to, if that's the case, don't you think we should fight some of the shit off? But then, when you're with me in my other religion, and we know why we let things grow on them, and why we let the light dimmer away from them, so the assassination becomes incandescent or compressant to what life is in reality, why the fuck would you want to understand why anyone knows the definition of being wrong if no one's right enough to be wrong, and that the only thing left as a translation is the guy who acts as hands for God? So I don't have a fucking word for you. The motherfucker is ugly as shit. So, and he has teeth. Well, what the fuck you want from me? He's dickless, has no teeth. His nails are falling off. His hair's missing. He has bugs coming out of some of his organs. Like, what the fuck you want from me? So even when, like, it does and doesn't make sense, it's like I could understand how you would think that. But then by the end of it, like, children grow every day. The only thing I want you to do is that if you can't believe in certain parts of your own paradise, then I don't give a shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to get you to understand that, like, these things, like the invisible creatures that were the only thing I had left of a religion, are all disappearing to chronological thoughts that you have. And if you could notice that, it would be so beautiful for you to comprehend how much progress that you all have made in a beautiful way. But also for the fact that, like, isn't that amazing that, like, they just grew legs and walked the fuck away? Put some of this shit together. Fuck my arrogance. Put some of this shit together. So then after all that, like, some of them did and truly lose their memory. Some of them did go to other places. Some of them are really just fucking aliens. And then there's supposed to be something that we all have always fought about and is always called sacrilege. Multiple dimensions. Then one of my closer parents and a few other people, we just gave up, and he was like, just tell them to stay the fuck away from a $5 bill because my kid's near there. And it's like, what the fuck? But anyways, by the end of it, it's still one of the other things where, like, you add up all this bullshit and reading between the lines of what life history and religion is worth to a humble, empathetic heart that has to understand beyond what all of this actually fucking means. It's almost a hypothetical, and I mean hypothetical. Okay, I'm just going to leave that there for a moment, so just in case you ever figure something out one day and then return to it. A story where on your way to that real definition, you didn't get sick because it's the modern day world. Beautiful. So we went back to the other thought, and we were like, well, don't you think that if you had noticed all that, where are you going to put the rest of what you do with your intellect, your greatness, your love for life, and what is supposed to be conspired to true meaning, other than trying to drive me crazy like a psychopath and persist with what's actually wrong with the world as what those other people choose to do just to be annoying? Who knows why, when all of this is not supposed to make sense because it's a profit for them to make money. So no one ever questioned the prophet because his name wasn't Prophet. But it was just like, you might as well call him Prophet because all he wants you to do is make more money than blood. Because it's like having a place to storage things before something attacks you or something. It's like a good backup plan to have some paperwork that you can walk with and people respect it. I don't know. See, so by then it's not like I'm disagreeing that much. It's just one of them extra things, and like, let's sign off on it, and then we go on to the next sub explanation of this. If that's the case, all of the other stubborn philosophies, intellects, and growths that I deal with and trade off in between duels with the fucking devil for what someone's life is worth to me, just walking down the street by herself, she got some pepper spray. Sweetheart, I love her. And it's, even if it wasn't her and they're just kind of like, well, what about those other people? Well, hell yeah, I don't care about them. But they're still worth the fact that, like, if I could convince them a little bit more to relook at what their value is in the overall food kingdom, the overall, food chain, that it might be a good perception for them to have the intellectual understanding that to brute, what you look like may not be worth more than like 2 to 35 cents. But if you can convince yourself what the other thing is worth more enough to research it so that you can figure out how much it's actually worth, you could use that to invest in the greater view of what you're supposed to do. Isn't that crazy? Like, I don't really want to sum that up either, because it's just kind of like, you figured all this out yourself. The only thing that's left over about this platter is that, of course, I didn't explain all this, but I did and didn't. Because it's like, if you ever put some of this miracle together, the rest of the work is right there. All you got to do is do it. You shouldn't just be like sitting there trying to war some guy that you completely don't understand. Because you, me, and war go together like you're so primitive sometimes that I'm the primitive one. But if I offered you food, I wouldn't be hunting for you or nesting for you. So I didn't give you the food. I left the food after I ate because I didn't eat all of it. That's how primitive this conversation is. But then when it gets back to what I signed off on and what I want you to do, I have to then convince you to not war me or not start bullshit with me or not to argue with me about some philosophies that belong to you that you're supposed to go and get at a different derived place that you already accidentally invented for yourself through faith. And all I have to do is remind us of that every once in a while. Because it just seems really weird and bizarre that, like, that you mean to tell me that you don't remember that, like, famine created the world once upon a time in a new design and in a new way. Or that all these things flung and gave up on fucking life. And all the other things that we have throughout history are proof of the infallibility of alien philosophical, psychological, intuitive ability. Like, I don't know, right? And sometimes it's like, okay, the joke is fine. Like, okay, not a real moon, haha. Not real technology. They meant it some other way. So, whatever. It wasn't real technology. It was that their contribution to life, even in a non sequitur way or uncomprehended way, was right for all of us. So eventually we profited off of what was left behind to fate. Because, like, listen, if you invented flying and then someone goes and invents propulsion, it's the guy who was flying's fault somehow. Of course they could see that. No, but even though it wasn't a flying, it was something else, but kind of, yes. So, that being said, they never came up with fire because they didn't freeze to death. I don't know. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's just so weird how life actually is. So, I don't know, whatever. But that's not really the fucking important part. But in order to gain extra philosophies that belong to such a spiraled out psychological definitive trip somewhere else, to really understand the rest of the deepness to the world and what are people hiding, what does it really mean, is it a joke, are they messing with it, is it another scam, is it a hustle? The answer is no. Are you really that insane as to believe that the world would invent a reason to make money? Trust me, if you go look at how hard the world will work for nothing in every other place, you will realize that it took a long time for us to learn how to invent a reason to use some fucking money. Yeah, we were really that fucking hard-headed, bruh. So, whatever. I mean, we probably spent more time trying to make money or develop a belief in it than the amount of time that we spent actually working hard and doing things. So, I don't know, whatever. So, worth the scrape of the sweat off my ass. How older gentlemen are. So, back to a different clinical point. I just found that to be interesting. And I still should elaborate on the original point of this, which is like, what happened to all these creatures? And what really defeated them outside of what was considered minor in the ecosystem? And we're not just talking about, I would rather start off at mythological beasts and then keep you all interested in this and then segue down to like why some modern day creatures resemble mythological beasts, because there was more likely to be room for more mythical creatures than what there actually was for survivable society in those different areas. And that all other, and even in by the way, the psychologically, even in animal kingdoms and shit, which you've heard of before, it's just very weird to talk about. But even in animal kingdoms, there are beliefs, and there are like fucking there are leaderships and kings and different things like that and leaders. So even by the end of it, their intuitive understanding is still up to some kind of philosophy or principle that dictates certain things that they do, so they're noticeable to a certain extent religiously and philosophically within life. I don't want to say psychologically because they're batshit fucking crazy, and the first Hippocratic oath that you would really have about that is, do no harm, and don't do harm on yourself, and so on and so forth. So they don't fit into a psychological criteria, but they are good for something like infinite, like, trudge, like fucking dread on and keep going, and like, they're good for infinity. Like, you just gotta keep jogging, you just gotta keep walking, you gotta have some more water, you gotta walk another 40 miles, you gotta be there in like 260 million miles of a fortnight or some shit. They're good for that. But that doesn't even require their full philosophical belief, because it would be just as simple as hearing someone accidentally beg while knowing that they're going to finish this mission whether they die or not, or whatever. They're just fucking weird like that. So anyway, I think that would be my point. I should really talk about the animal things more, but I'm skeptical to do that because it's just one of them things where, like, I think it's more important to talk about why is the devil invisibly gambling all of their philosophical meanings against what humanity is worth every second, minute, and moment of life while you're out there hardworking and doing your stuff? Or why is it that, the elements are less in effect than what the devil's deal is to make it more visible? Global warming, global cooling, is it too windy? What is the degeneration of genocide if it has nothing to do with how we rationalize what reproduction is and growth is, or proponents? All of these things don't work into one overcasting ovation together, because it just is one of those things. Could you imagine if 1 of 6 and 1 of 9 people in that little room of a circle could only disagree with each other about the largest fractional parts of what their real true meanings? So life sociologically only makes sense to people of a loser, disgusting credence in order to survive the rest of it. So then it goes back into, okay, we'll drop you off here because it's better. If they're just aliens and whatnot, and they didn't do anything to us, and it was probably some kind of appropriate assimilation, or if it has not, well, let's ignore that because most people didn't want to know that, but any divine inheritance or endowment within history, life, facts, or anything like that has to do with, did we get something out of this to grow or whatever? And that automatically, anything that you interrupt or do things with fate about or abusive about, we have to stand up against it. Just say, fuck you, no, I don't owe you. And then we just don't owe. And by the end of it, the attribute of what we understand always has an effect on life and history. So probably not, they went their own way. But it's still in the greater conclusion of everything. How could you not? When, like, everybody already sees everything in effect on life about everything that everyone else does. You bought a skateboard, Back to the Future exists. Whatever. You bought a skateboard, bruh. Bruh, you bought a skateboard, bruh. Where's that skateboard at? I know you got a skateboard, don't lie to me. Like, what the fuck, sir? Right. But anyway, by the end of it, it's still one of them things where you bought a skateboard. Hey, Blair, I know you bought a skateboard and a newspaper. I saw that fucking newspaper and a skateboard. 89 my ass. So anyways, by then, that's 2 cheeks not staring down. So we went back to, like, the other fucking fact. If that's what aliens did, so be it. No big fucking deal. Still seems kind of weird and disgusting, but the leftover part of that is that even if aliens, like, were psychologically meant for all of us, and we never fucked them and blah blah, and we never made a relationship. Isn't it difficult to believe that we are the aliens? But just go look at yourself. Look at what we're actually dealing with. Look at the fact that demons are betting on your life all the time, and they don't even know what they're betting about, because principally the perspectiveness of what we're trying to procure is far more important from each other that the greed takes in, and no one's actually using their common sense. So even while you're sitting there and your best guardian, whose only translation would be like, in the other language they're called like a scourge or a death force or some weird shit. So anyway, in that place, we don't do no deals with them. So even when you ask me to do a deal with the weird motherfucker, it's still kind of like, what's with all the animal philosophies that are an inherence of all of our species? So they donated to us, we gave back, and somehow we ended up with some aliens? Or you're hashing out all these deals and they are endowed to attack each other for a overall answer to conspire to what our real profit is. So the real profit would be that the demon wanted money at the time, and it's easier to loan out their hearts than to loan out their prophecy. So none of them belong to each other by truth and justice. So we can't honor that. So by the end of it, we close the door on this. And as stupid as it fucking sounds, and as crazy as that sounds, the lavish part about all this stuff is what we're really echoing is that, can you believe this motherfucker's still trying to hash out deals with us? Why don't you just skip that part? But that's not even what I'm criticizing, because I'm not supposed to criticize you. We get back to the real issue here. If you think that, or you know that for a fact, and this guy's doing deals, and they're not even supposed to be in the way, go look at yourself. I'm not talking about you're ugly. I'm not talking about you did anything wrong. I'm not talking about, oh, what's this or that. I'm talking about for what's really wrong in the universe. It's not a wrinkle situation, but some people have asked me to ask us philosophically, how many dimensions are we living in? And philosophically, or principally, how many dimensions are we living in? And here we are at a very bigger question. Do you think you're an alien? Because, see, there's certain things you have to answer for me before I can answer you some of these other questions. Because it's like you knew already that everyone is busy and they're all selling each other down the fucking river. But the apocalypse doesn't belong to us. Me and you are two little dots in this world. Now, even when I'm sitting here and I'm like, you noticed I'm standing in the devil's place, right? All right, and then you got an angel over there. Me and him are very quiet. Now, even when he's quieter than I am and does a very good job, it's not questionable. Why you would ask me all these weird, complicated questions that I do answer is kind of weird, because we're here at this other answer. Now, what I get sickened by is that if you're not as old as a dinosaur, as old as a lizard with some kind of fancy blood, let's get back to what we're really talking about. If you can't answer a few of these simple, weird questions or know anything that I'm talking about so that you can have your own opinion about it, I can't even go over there and slap that other demon for trying to ask us to fuck you on the subway. You know, weird shit like that. Hated it. Hated it. Hated the question, hated the allegation, hated the fucking whole thing. So even when I didn't have a fucking opinion, my opinion was bowed down. Here's some chicken McNuggets or some chicken wings. Shut the fuck up, loser. But that's not really what I was really going to have to do under the guise of what you're doing. So even when everybody else is living, doing their fucking thing, I'm like a dog. Like you wanted a zombie pet. We found you a zombie pet. Fuck yeah, it drools blood. I don't know why, but you asked for it. It was your stipulation, not mine. I don't own that life. That's not mine. So, you know, you fucking throw some chicken nuggets in there and you get the fuck out of here. What do I know about that? And then when it comes to all these crazy ass answers and questions and all this other bullshit, we're not talking about the last previous girl from the other thing, by the way. So anyway, when it comes back to the other previous answers, it's still just like, did anybody else notice that while I'm sitting here like summoning up, about to duel this fucking demon dude about what our lives and price tags are worth towards the religion of our animals, it's still like, what the fuck is wrong with the fact that you don't notice, wouldn't remind me, wouldn't have known to remind me, and still don't know what the other greater battle is that the whole existence may or may not have a few times lapping throughout history in between a few Bibles, given up on life and exhumed and expired and deleted itself from existence, while all of us may be dueling this invisible fucking devil or demon with all these cards against everyone in humanity. And I might go over there and slap him correctly, but we don't know what he's juggling and what animal he's using. So then we go back to a deck of cards and we start dueling them. We start, kind of flipping them around and, shuffling them. And then we start throwing out different cards and shit. But some of the cards that do have weird meanings are linked into what society's meaning is about the attribute of kingdom and family. Which, if you ever known how a kingdom is really run about families, never talk about it, because in the international world it is so fucking depressing, because every other family members that are different all have to accept that in a militant form none of us would have had the birthright to talk about what leadership in a family was, even for each individual family member being treated like a what's it called, puzzle or pawn piece or a chess piece. And that's just how that is. That's how you would have had to think about it. That's how you would have had to live. That's how you would have called empathy. And I didn't appreciate it either. So we threw that shit away. Or at least I did. So anyway, by the end of it, no. And you, some knowledge you want to be forbidden, because it's just fucking unpleasant. And it may make stronger people, but it doesn't make better people. And even as the other brutes and different psychologicals dwindle and fall out of sanity from reality and lose the ability to hold on to reality just from the sheer will of human beings being weak enough to not give a shit about them and let them go, other than them trying to work out too hard and impress us with their dick muscle, and we just don't owe them. So by the end of it, whatever. And I'm not even hating. I don't care if you have a dick, a big old one. I don't give a shit. Just stay the fuck away from me with the extra attitude, unless it's gonna be about some shit. What are you, trying to survive stupidity? Because it's not like we owe you. So anyways, back to the fucking point. When it's still, whatever, the fucking nobody likes that bullshit. So let me get back to the fucking point. Aliens, even if they didn't fuck us, or if they did, it still would have been something that we would have earned from fate that provided us something so great and so good for all of us and each other that it was almost unnoticeable to the price that we had to pay to not suffer the world, or for what they brag about suffering in order to be happier about the modern day world. And let's just face it, some creatures just like to sleep. Because sometimes you're sitting there oh no, that's not true. That's gotta be torture. Oh, it's just like sleeping. Okay. Some animals and shit just like sleeping. I don't fucking know why. So I don't know. Whatever. That's the last piece to give you, is that some of them just like sleeping. So anyway. So I think that's the greater point of all that, and but I still should leave it with aliens and the fucking animals. But yeah, go look at the existence of how these different animals and creatures went extinct and shit. And maybe I'll try to work on a biblical translation on what the de-evolved creatures look like today in the modern day world. Some of it's absolutely true. And some of it is only predicted to be true because there is no last known marking or note about it. It's just crazy enough that if a laboratory scientist left you a note that a griffin is not a poisonous war pig or a literal boar with fungus and bile in its mouth, then it just wasn't. But if they left the note that way, then it would be really weird that anyone else was pigs don't fly, and, what the fuck, and you're a liar, and that's creepy. You ever just be where's my hustle? I don't know why they passed this down from generation to generation for free. Sometimes you just go back far enough and find out that people are just writing down some basic notes that it is not a reptilian animal, but it isn't, and the other one isn't either. But weird. So you have to remember that these two creatures have the ability to do something profoundly disgusting. I didn't know they evolved from fucking bad things. So anyway, now we get back to the clarity of alcohol and why alcohol isn't rotten and it's only pure. Now, once you're done going through a prism of things, like if there's a prism on one side, then there is division on the other side, which would be a form of darkness. So you find that in conspiring by yourself for way too long. So even if you are suffering in some weird way or whatever the fuck, the other platelets and the other forms of reality that aren't visible are philosophically somewhat visible and are like stepping stones to other cursors in life. So yeah, some weird things. But let's just leave you all off again with alcohol and the other thing that I was supposed to talk about in its correlation with alcohol. So yeah. Not that alcohol is necessary for anything or whatever.